Welcome back to the swamp, my friends. Today we are covering a topic I have never done before. You guys have all asked about glitch in the matrix stories and lost time stories, so I figured it's about time to finally tackle those. If you have a story you would like to share in a future video, whether it's a lost time story or something else, be sure to submit your story at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. I would love to share your story with everyone here in the swamp. It's stories like yours that help keep this channel going. Now, without any more hesitation, let's get into these creepy and unexplained lost time and glitch in the matrix stories. When I was about 14 years old, I experienced what seemed to be real deja vu. It wasn't a gut or odd feeling like one might get when they experience a reoccurring memory. The same event occurred within at most 60 seconds between each other. It was about 9:30, 10 o'clock on a summer night when I and my friend Nick were sitting on a curb on his street after a day of skateboarding around town. We were on the other side of the street looking at his house, just talking our crap, when his neighbor came across the street. The house we were sitting next to, they rolled up on his road, on a bike. We thought nothing of it at first. He was the type of guy who wore the spandex and the whole getup. Not 30 to 45 seconds later, another biker wearing the same outfit rides up, gets off, and proceeds to walk his bike up the driveway. Both I and my friend are like, "What the heck? Were you riding with a buddy today?" He looks at both of us perplexed and says, "What are you talking about?" I say, "Didn't you just pull up like 30 seconds ago?" The biker says, "Come on guys, stop effing around." And I and my friend look at each other like, what the heck just happened? Was this real time deja vu? For one thing, we knew the guy was known to giving us a hard time, but it doesn't really explain how we saw him twice. We had a full view of what was going on, and this is not the type of guy to pull a silly prank on some kids after a day of cycling. Fast forward to last year, my buddy Nick was actually one of the bartenders at my sister's wedding reception. We lost touch through the years, and I'm 27 now. I asked him about this incident. He told me he never forgot about it. Until this day, he can't explain it. I believe this was real deja vu or lost time. Anybody else ever have any experiences like this? I don't want to be one of those guys who tell stories secondhand, but my mom's boyfriend doesn't have the means to share, and I highly doubt he ever will, and his story is too interesting to keep to myself. To start off, he is Nepali, and grew up near the Himalayan mountains. This is where the story takes place, and the whole time he is telling me his tale, his eyes are so big like saucers, and he's speaking in a terrified tone, which I've never heard him do before. Near his house in Nepal, there is a huge open field that apparently no one ever walks in because of a superstition. His grandmother has seen numerous lights and orbs running through that field at breakneck speeds. Even their oxen won't go into this field. As kids, they were heavily advised not to go into the field, and they weren't taught to fear it, but rather it's just forbidden to go there. So one evening, around 3 p.m., he gets into an argument with his father because he doesn't want to help paint the house, he wants to play. His father tells him no, so H, I guess I'll call him H for this story, says some disrespectful stuff and runs off. He doesn't pay attention to where he's going and ends up walking along this stream to sit. H sits there for a few moments, staring at the stream to collect his thoughts, and suddenly, whack, on the back of his head. Now he's sitting under a small tree, so he assumes it's just a branch, maybe a bird or something hit him. So he turns and sees nothing, so ignores it. Then it happens again and again, getting progressively harder. He gets scared and gets up, running away from whatever it was that was hitting him. But as he's running, as fast as his legs can carry him, something is still smacking him on the back of his head. So he turned to look, and this is where his voice trembled. there are large, humanoid, disembodied pale legs chasing him. He told me that every time he tried to look up to see its face, that it would slap him harder. Eventually, he runs to his home and says, "Mom, Dad," and passes out. He was drenched in sweat and exhausted. He ended up sleeping 14 plus hours. His parents told him he was gone for 4 hours, and what seemed to him just to be like a few minutes. He had come running from the direction of the forbidden field. This really wigs me out every time I think about it, and he tells this better than me, but I figured you guys would enjoy it. Thank you for sharing my story, by the way. I consider myself a rational person. Of course, most people would believe that of themselves, however objective they try to be. This is something that happened to me and a friend around 18 years ago. I was hanging out with him and his cousin in his new house. This was a somewhat busy area near a major commercial center. Sometime at around 9 p.m., we decided to take a walk to a convenience store for food. His cousin decided to stay at the house. It took us 30 minutes to get to the store. There was a fair amount of vehicular and pedestrian traffic. On the way back, we both started getting this really weird feeling. It's honestly really hard to describe now, but both of our experiences matched up when discussing it later on. It felt like the air was so much lighter, thinner, if that makes any sense. The street seemed odd somehow, out of place. All of a sudden, there were no cars or people around anymore, and everything just went dead silent. This continued for a few minutes, and we both started walking faster. What freaks me out though, is to this day, what I could never explain is this. Both of our watches stopped working entirely. Mine is digital, and his is analog. His watch stopped at 9:41 p.m. He was later able to get it fixed. Mine, however, was dead for good. When we got back to the house, it was minutes to 11, and his cousin was freaking out. We were gone for an hour longer than we were meant to. There was no way we could have taken that long to get back. If anything, we walked faster than we did getting to the store. The reason I'm thinking about this incident now is because of another story that asked about an unexplained event that happened to you. It's funny, because it's something I usually don't like thinking about or talking about. Neither does my friend for that matter. But either way, I'm sorry the story was so short and probably not very creepy, but thank you for sharing it anyway if you do. To start, I would like to put forth that I am an occultist with years of experience researching magic, spiritualism, and religious dogma, though I am also an atheist with my own interpretation of the supernatural things. Now, we can get to the meat of my problem. So, where I currently work, the night guys refuse to go on the 4th floor. They say it's haunted, and even have supposed video proof of a table moving to hit one of us. It has never been a problem for me though, and will always go up there without the lights on. I'm not very scared of that kind of stuff. Today though, that changed. You see, for some reason, I decided to reverse my usual route, going up east and going down west. I got to the 4th floor, and everything was going fine. There is one door separating the room with a staircase to another hallway leading to the floor's lobby. I remember getting to the very middle of the lobby, seeing the pink of the floor, before finding myself going my usual route. I was just opening the door to the room with the staircase, except the hallway light was on. No memory at all walking from the lobby to the door, nor turning on the light. Nothing before the click of the lock. ever since this last happened, I have had hard times remembering anything. I've been unable to sleep more than 2 hours a night, and like clockwork, I wake up within minutes of exactly 2 hours from when I finally fall asleep, until I've been awake for 20 hours plus. I don't feel tired like I usually do. I've also noticed I become nauseous if I eat anything, and I get a headache on my left side, extending from my socket to my temple to my neck and shoulder. Any help or advice would be appreciated. I'm not really sure what happened or how I lost that time, but I am pretty scared. Something really weird has happened to me twice. I have told this story to some of my friends, but no one has experienced anything similar. So I am wondering if anyone out there has gone through the same thing or has an explanation of what this might be. So, the first time this happened, I was around 10 or 11 years old. My sister, who was around 3 years at the time, and I shared the same room. She was sleeping in her cradle, and it was sometime around 8 a.m. I believe. I just was woken up, and I stayed laying on the bed looking toward the direction where my sister was still sleeping. Then, what I thought was my mom walked into the room, wearing a salmon pink PJ she had on. Then, she stood right in front of my sister's cradle. She just kept staring at her sleeping, which I thought was odd, but I didn't think much of it. Then out of nowhere, she said, "Boo," and disappeared. Right after that, my sister started crying, and then my actual mom walked in, wearing a different set of PJs by the way, picked her up and took her to her room. I didn't say anything at that moment. I just stayed there quiet. I don't really know why I didn't get scared at the time. I guess I was just so confused. I know it was weird, but I guess I just didn't think much of it. The second time, something similar happened. I was in my senior year of high school, so I must have been probably about 18 years old or so. I was sleeping in my room. At the time, my sister had her own room, so I was alone, and I was woken up by the sound of my mom yelling my name very, very loud. It sounded almost as if she was angry. I woke up a little bit, frightened, since it was a school night and I thought maybe I woke up late to go to school and she was mad at me because of that. This happened often, to be honest. But then I realized it was still dark out, since I didn't see any light coming from the window. I saw my mom standing right in front of my window. It was dark, but I could still see her. She just kept staring at me and didn't say a word. I thought that was really weird, so I said, "Mom?" And right after I said that, she began to distort, almost as if she was like a hologram. And then she or it disappeared. This time, I was really scared, so I ran into my parents' room and stayed there for the rest of the night. The following morning I told them what happened, but they told me I must have been sleeping. I don't really know what happened that night, but I am pretty sure I was awake because the noise of someone that sounded like my mom yelling woke me up in the first place. Nothing like that has ever happened to me again, but I have always wondered what that thing was and why it happened twice, and why I'm the only one that remembers anything. It seems like time always stops when these events happen too. It seems like, I don't know, I'm like almost ripped out of time itself. Has anyone experienced anything similar, or has any clue as to what this thing or things might be, and why it would look like my mom, and why it seems like time slows down or stops? I do not really believe the paranormal, like 100%, but I'm pretty open-minded, so I decided to give it a try anyway, and here I am. There are 3 events that happened in my life, I am currently 24, that I cannot really explain, and the last one is the most unbelievable. But I'll start with the very first one. This happened to me a long time ago. I was probably 5 or 6 years old. I was at my grandmother's house and it was the morning, and she left me alone for maybe a half an hour. I was a very quiet and calm kid, so she had no problems leaving me alone for a bit. While I was watching TV, I heard some noises coming from the room where my uncle and mother used to sleep when they lived with their parents. It wasn't a particular noise. It was a very regular, as if someone was doing their business inside kind of noise. I knew I was alone though, so I decided to go there and see what was going on. I wasn't scared or anything, I was just curious. So when I went inside the room, it was all completely normal and empty. But as I was about to leave, from the other side of the bed, I saw a figure jumping up, like if it was hiding under the bed with a blanket on them. It was my uncle. He started howling at me, but in a playful way, as you do to a kid. So I wasn't scared but rather entertained, and after a few seconds I left the room. Now my uncle's room is at the end of the corridor, and at the sides of this corridor, there's my grandmother's room and the bathroom. So to go back to the living room where I was watching TV, I had to pass by my grandmother's room. When I was passing my grandmother's room, I looked into there, and what I saw was something like what was in my uncle's room. I can't really explain it. It was like it jumped through the wall or something, and it was doing the same thing, and the same howling. This time I didn't stop watching. I just saw him while passing by, and when I passed by the bathroom, he jumped from behind the door doing the same thing again. I'm sorry, it's just so hard to explain. After that, I went back on the couch and continued watching TV. I never spoke about it again with my grandmother, because back then, I didn't think it was much of a big deal. But as I grow up now, this thing has really stuck with me, and I can't really explain what happened. A lot of people say it's some sort of glitch in the Matrix or some sort of time loop or something. I also want to say that my uncle is fine. He's not dead, and when this happened, he was far away from where my grandma lives. There's also no way to sneak in from one room to another, so it's like he would have had to jump through the wall literally. So this is my first paranormal event. As I said, I'm pretty skeptical, but I'd like you to know that I have gotten past these events and they don't scare me anymore. So this story takes place in the mid-90s. I was still a very young lad, 5 or 6 at the very most. While this isn't a particularly long or shocking story, some of the details have stuck with me for more than 2 decades, in crystal clarity. It was after my bedtime. I remember this in particular because I was having to read my book by flashlight. I was lying in bed on my stomach, propped up by my elbows. It was a very dark night outside. We lived in North Dakota, so I could see plenty of stars. However, it was not much later than 10 or 11 p.m. The book was about Greek mythology, obviously fairly simplified for my reading level, but still pretty graphic. The picture on the current page was Hercules fighting the Hydra. I remember being very interested and feeling wide awake, happy to be reading. I didn't feel any sense of unease or any reason to be scared. Suddenly, like a flash, it was bright out. Morning had come. I was still laying in the fairly uncomfortable position. My elbows were sore, and my flashlight had burned out its batteries. From my point of view, it was like a mere moment had passed, but the world around me seemed to have skipped forward 8 hours or so. If I had fallen asleep, I would have rolled over, bumped the flashlight, or at least drooled on the page. But nothing had moved, and nothing was out of place. For some reason, this particular event has always stuck with me. It marked a watershed moment between perceiving as a child and what I now recognize as an adult consciousness. It was somewhat like a computer rebooting to install updates. I don't know why, but this moment often crops up in my memory. Does anyone have any experience with something like this? I would love to know. Please comment down below. And thank you, Swamp, for sharing my story. This isn't the most impressive, scary thing that's happened to me, but it's definitely spooky and unexplainable. Since I'm sort of reliving these stories, I figured I might as well write about them and get them out there. As a teen, we're talking probably around 1996 here, me and a few friends went through that let's go ghost hunting phase. On this particular night, there were 3 of us. We had heard stories about the ghost on Angelica Lake, which is a small park with a lake near Reading, Pennsylvania. If you've ever seen Avatar: The Last Airbender, then you've seen this lake. Shyamalan shot the scenes at the lake where the kid is bending water. Anyway, we drove to Angelica Lake at around 8 p.m. or so. It was summer, and the sun hadn't fully gone down yet. I remember we waited there from dusk until it was full dark around 9 p.m. or so. The 3 of us walked around the lake hoping to see something manifest out of the water, but unfortunately, nothing ever happened. We didn't hang out long, so it was roughly 10 p.m. when we decided to move on. The next stop was called Spook Lane, located 25 minutes away in a rural town called Ole, Pennsylvania. This road was another urban legend everyone in the area had heard about. But this is where things really started getting weird that night. We arrived at Spook Lane. You can actually Google it if you want to. Sometime around 11 p.m. We didn't stop anywhere along the way. We just left Angelica Lake and drove right there. Now it's called Spook Lane, and the road is really named that. But I've since tried to locate the exact spot where this happened. I don't think the road is technically called Spook Lane, but rather a road that connects to it. Anyway, for the sake of the story, and given that Google Maps didn't exist way back then, to everyone involved, we were on Spook Lane. Keep in mind that this area is way out in the sticks. There are acres of agricultural land, but also heavily wooded areas. Along this road are several really old busted up vacant houses from like the 1800s. They're in total disrepair and crumbling in on themselves. From the outside looking in, they're quintessential haunted houses. Teens had long visited this area and added graffiti, pentagrams, etc., like dumb stuff teens do to already scary locations to help make them scarier, I guess. We drive down Spook Lane and the area turns from rural, where there are a few houses here and there, to heavy woods. My buddy who is driving points out one of the scary looking houses on the left side of the road and said that there is always a light in one of the upper windows, but as you can see, the house is totally broken down and vacant, so what is causing the light? You know, that kind of spooky thing. Well, this night there was indeed a light in the window. He also says that some kind of spirit takes over your car when you're out there, so you can't get away. The rest of us just shrugged this off at the time. We keep driving maybe 2,000 feet and come to an area where there's 2 broken down spooky houses across the street from each other. So we stop and get out. Of course, there's broken furniture in the front yards, graffiti, melted candle wax from previous teens, etc. We decide to go into one of the houses, the one that looked kind of stable and safe. Well, as safe as they could be. We looked around and go to the back door. There are woods and basically nothing out there but acres and acres of trees. Then all of a sudden, we can hear a distant dog bark, then another. Then several dogs are going absolutely crazy in the distance. Then we hear something large charging towards us. It wasn't a dog because their barks didn't get louder, and whatever this thing was sounded real big. The ground actually felt like thuds. So of course, we came looking for thrills and a scare, and we got it. We hightail it back to the car and jump in. No idea what is coming at us, but we were not sticking around to find out. My buddy starts the car and we take off in the direction we came. But after a few hundred feet, the car slows down. I'm sitting shotgun and I'm yelling to my friend to get us the heck out of here, but the car won't go faster than like 10 miles per hour. I tell him to smash the gas pedal, and I watch him do it, but the car will not speed up. I make sure his other foot is on the brake pedal, and it's not. I make sure the car is in drive, and it is. He's smashing the pedal down and the car doesn't even rev. It just creeps along at 10 miles per hour or whatever slow speed. It was going the same speed the whole way down the road until we got to that old creepy house with the light in the upper window, and crossed beyond it. Then all of a sudden the car just takes off because my friend's foot was smashed down on the floor the whole time. There wasn't much real physical proof of this being anything more than urban legends, active imaginations, and a crappy car. So I don't know what to chalk it up as. However, we went to the all-night diner about 20 minutes away to debrief and talk about what had just happened. When we looked at the clock in the lobby, we realized it was just after 3 a.m. We couldn't account for the past 4 hours. I mean, it doesn't sound like what I explained could have taken more than 30 minutes tops. But for some reason, we lost 4 hours on Spook Lane that night. That was probably the scariest part of it. Thanks for listening to these Lost Time and Glitch in the Matrix stories. Honestly, I'm not really used to reading these kind of things, but they're not too far off from our Unexplained series, so I did enjoy them. I have had a few weird deja vu moments myself, and maybe I'll share those in a next video if we do any more of these stories. Have you ever lost time? Have you ever had a glitch in the Matrix kind of thing happen to you? I'd love to know. Please comment down below. If you have a story that you would like to share in a future video, whether it be a lost time, event, or some sort of thing like that, be sure to submit it at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. I would love to share your story with everyone here in the swamp. It's stories like yours that help keep this channel going. If you enjoyed these stories, please hit that like button, as it helps me out a ton. If you're new to the swamp, why not subscribe and turn on notifications to never miss a new video? I upload them almost every single day on all things natural and supernatural. If you're not aware, you can download your favorite Swamp Dweller scary stories on iTunes, Spotify, Podbean, and pretty much every other major podcasting platform out there. Thank you guys, as always, for supporting the swamp. I'll see you guys soon with another creepy video. If you made it to the very end of this video, today's code word is strained clock. Comment that down below to let me know you made it to the end, and to, of course, confuse everybody who didn't do it. I'll see you guys soon with another creepy video. Tally ho.